Thank you all so much for being here this evening. I say this evening because I am in Colorado and it's about 6 o'clock here in Colorado. But as we just mentioned, we've got folks coming in from all over. So wherever you are coming from, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time today joining this parent family webinar. This is a really important, and as you can see from the number of folks that are joining us, webinar that we do every year. Obviously, financially, the cost of your education is a pretty big factor and really important information. So I'm so thrilled to be alongside my colleague, Joe Donnelly, who is our Executive Director of Financial Aid. I'm going to turn it over to him in just a moment. But before we do that, I just wanted to give a couple updates from the Office of Admissions and then also talk a little bit about how this webinar is going to go this evening. So welcome, everyone. My name is Heather Daniels, and I serve as the Executive Director of Admissions here at Colorado State University. Thank you all so much for being here. We are really excited to have these webinars on a monthly basis, so keep an eye on the calendar. We typically will host these the second Tuesday of every month, and we'll do another one about financial aid and paying for college a little bit later in the cycle. So a little bit about how this is all going to go this evening. In just a little bit, I'm going to turn things over to Joe. He's got a really great presentation and kind of talk through what it looks like with financial aid and college costs here at Colorado State University. We invite you all to please add questions in. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but given how many folks are joining us this evening, it might be a little challenging. So we'll try to do as many as that we can. If you are unable to get your question answered, please feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us. We'll put some links into the chat, how to contact the Office of Financial Aid and then also the Office of Admissions. So a couple updates that I wanted to provide from the Office of Admissions and sort of where we are right now in the process. Our early action deadline has just passed about a month ago on November 15th. And then our next deadline will be January 15th. So if your student is still working on their application for the fall of 2025, still plenty of time to submit their application. We're in the process of going through and reviewing our applications and trying to get decisions to students as quickly as possible. And then soon you will be receiving invitations to our admitted student events that we'll be hosting throughout the spring months, starting in February, then going into March and April. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to the Office of Admissions and contact your admissions counselor. It can be a really great resource to sort of get you going in the process and then connect you with different folks on campus. All right, I am going to stop talking for just a moment and turn it over to Joe and let him introduce himself to you and then get going on the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us tonight to talk about financial aid, which is just a great, scintillating, exciting topic, especially in the evening when folks are winding down and sometimes need something to help them relax and go to sleep at night. So I promise I won't try to bore you, or I'll try to avoid boring you, but we really do want to leave you with some important information that will help you as you begin this process of admitting and potentially deciding to attend Colorado State University. So as Heather mentioned, my name is Joe Donnelly. I serve as Executive Director for the Office of Financial Aid here at Colorado State University. And a little bit about me, I am from Kansas originally, as Heather mentioned. I have been at Colorado State University for 13 years, and I have the privilege of leading a team of about 45 staff who are responsible for the delivery of about $380 million of financial aid programs to the student body at Colorado State. And what we're going to talk about tonight is really high level. So I want to stress that because when we talk about financial aid, a lot of times there's really personal situations that are very unique to your student, your family, that aren't able to be addressed accurately and with a lot of depth in a presentation like this. So I'm giving you broad information and would encourage you to reach out to my office this if you have any questions at all about your unique circumstances and how to navigate the financial aid process. We know that choosing a college or university is really a difficult decision, and oftentimes finances factor into that decision, perhaps more than any other piece of information. And we want to make sure that you have a real idea of what the options are to help finance a college education at Colorado State University. So, a little bit of a roadmap about my remarks tonight. We're going to talk a little about college costs, and that will differ depending upon whether or not you're a Colorado resident or if you might be coming to us from out of state. We'll talk about the financial aid process, how to apply, different resources that exist within financial aid programs at Colorado State. I'll also spend a little bit of time talking about some other gap options to cover the bill above and beyond financial aid or even in place of financial aid. And then we'll leave with some next steps and action items for you all to take back and think about as the year comes to an end and you begin navigating the financial aid process if you haven't done so already. And as Heather mentioned, we'll have a little bit of time maybe at the end for some questions. There is a crowd of you tonight, so we aren't going to be able to get to all of your questions, but we'll really try to look for some of those big questions that have some themes, what's coming in most prevalently, and get to those. So,
Hey, Joe.
yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in for a moment. I think some folks are having a hard time hearing you, but maybe they can hear me. So maybe seeing if you can rejoin. I hear you both. Okay, there's someone that's saying they can hear us both. Okay. All right. Well, our staff in the background mentioned that maybe just refreshing and you'd be able to hear both of us. So for those of you that are having some issues, if you can refresh. And then also, I'm sorry if people are having issues, we'll have a recording of this available on our website. But Joe, it looks like you could probably go ahead and keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. We'll keep on going. So, college costs. This is one of the biggest questions that folks have, oftentimes even before they begin the financial aid process. And what I'm going to share with you right now are estimates around cost of attendance based on the information that is applicable to the current academic year. So, most of you are here in this space this evening interested in the 25-26 academic year. Because some of those figures are not set yet, and we're still fairly early in the process, I'm going to kind of step through some of the amounts that are applicable to this academic year, and you can begin to kind of think or get a feel for where those costs lay. So in this slide, you can show that there's a breakout between resident of Colorado, non-resident cost of attendance, and then WUI. Very quickly, our resident cost of attendance is applicable to only students who have residency via Colorado residency law in the state. So if you don't qualify for Colorado residency, you are a non-resident student for tuition purposes. And the tuition and fee amounts are a little bit higher, quite a bit higher, if you're a non-resident student. If you're a non-resident student and you've been admitted from a WUI state, which is the Western Undergraduate Exchange Program, you could qualify for a discount on non-resident tuition down to roughly 150% of the Colorado resident tuition rate. So that's the difference between those numbers across the top. And those numbers are inclusive of things, not just including tuition and fees, but on-campus housing and meal estimates, transportation estimates, so getting to and from campus, books and supplies and materials estimates, as well as personal and miscellaneous expenses. The Financial Aid Office website goes into more detail around those specific elements within that overall number listed across the top of this slide. When you think about cost of attendance, though, I really stress that you should think about it in terms of direct costs, so things that are going to show up on a student bill, and then things that are not going to show up on a student bill, but are expenses that a student can reasonably anticipate to have while they're attending. So direct costs tend to be things that you're going to pay directly to the university. Tuition, fees, on-campus housing and meal plans, Indirect costs are things that are not going to show up on the bill, but you really need to plan for them as part of the cost of education. Those include expenses for off-campus housing and meals if the student is qualified to live off-campus. Books and supplies can vary by the student or the program of study. Transportation expenses might vary, as well as personal expenses that your student might have while attending throughout the semester. If you are a resident of Colorado, you qualify for the College Opportunity Fund. The College Opportunity Fund is specific to Colorado residents, and it's one way that the state of Colorado gets state support for higher education into the hands of students. So for this current academic year, 24-25, it's about $116 per credit hour. So it reduces the tuition rate by about that much per credit hour. The steps to get the College Opportunity Fund authorized involve applying for the fund. It's very short and sweet. You register in courses, so you get enrolled in resident instruction and courses on campus, and then you authorize Colorado State University to receive the College Opportunity Fund stipend on behalf of your student, or your student authorizes us to receive it on behalf of them. This isn't something that's going to be included in your financial aid offer letter that is forthcoming, but it will be reflected in that cost of attendance amount that I just gave you. So tuition and fees are reduced by the assumption that a student in Colorado is going to qualify for COF. There's more information on the Financial Aid Office website, along with specific steps on how to authorize those dollars. Speaking of applying for aid, we'll segue into the big piece, which is filling out the free application for federal student aid. So for this upcoming academic year, you will want to complete the 2025-26 financial aid application, the FAFSA. It is available right now. FAFSA.gov is the website, and make sure that you're filling out that application for the upcoming school year. The current year's application is still there, but it's only applicable if your student would be attending in the spring of 2025. I had to stop and look at the year, or this coming summer. But for most of you, you're probably going to be completing the 25-26 free application for federal student aid. We try to encourage our students and families to apply as quickly as possible to have that application at CSU by March 1st. We don't have a hard deadline for financial aid at Colorado State University, but we do want to make sure that we have enough time to process that application and get a financial aid offer in your hands so that you have all of the information that you need to make an informed decision on where to attend. The FAFSA does have to be renewed each year, so each year about this time, December 1, you'll want to complete the new application, and it's going to be based off of tax information that is 2 years old. So for 2025-26, that application is going to use your 2023 federal income tax and earnings information. Of course, 2-year-old data sometimes is not reflective of what your current financial situation is. So if that's the case, this is one of those examples. Reach out to our office directly and we'll help navigate you through options there. And this application, the FAFSA, is not consideration. It doesn't provide consideration for any of the admissions-based scholarship programs. The FAFSA is really the ticket to be considered for federal student aid grants, some state of Colorado grants, CSU need-based financial grants, as well as student loans and work-study programs, but scholarships are considered separately from the FAFSA. If you are a student who qualifies in the state of Colorado under the Colorado Asset provision and would meet the definition of a student who identifies as undocumented and qualify for in-state tuition, there is a separate financial aid application for you, and it's the Colorado application for state financial aid, otherwise known as the CASFA. Really behaves in the same way that the FAFSA does, and it asks for much of the same information that the FAFSA does as well. The CASFA is not quite ready. The state anticipates that it will probably be about December 15th when that application is made available. Just be in mind that that application is forthcoming, and if that meets, if you are a student who would be filling out the CASFA, keep that on your radar for that to be released. Of course, types of financial aid are what a lot of folks have questions about. So it gets to be confusing when we talk about grants and we talk about scholarships, and student loans and even work study can provide a lot of confusion, especially if you're navigating this for the first time. So grants are typically financial aid monies that do not need to be repaid. And typically they're based on demonstrating some degree of financial need from the financial application, so the FAFSA or the CASFA. Scholarships behave in the same way oftentimes that grants do, so monies that don't need to be repaid, but oftentimes there's a merit stipulation attached to those. So scholarships that are considered as part of your admissions application, scholarships that would be considered based on academic areas of interest, community involvement. We have students bring scholarships to us from a variety of sources outside of the university, but typically they're free money, monies that don't need to be repaid. Direct loans are a form of financial aid that are applied for via the FAFSA. So these are federally guaranteed loans that are limited in terms of what a student can borrow, how much, and when. And the FAFSA is the ticket to being considered for loans. Work study is oftentimes the same thing. So the FAFSA is going to be your ticket to being considered for work study awards, where you're actually earning a form of financial aid to help pay for your cost of attendance. I'll dive a little bit more into scholarships from a high level. At Colorado State University, we have an admissions based scholarship program known as the Green and Gold Scholarship. So it's a little bit different depending on whether you're a resident of the state of Colorado or you're a non resident. But if you are a Colorado resident, generally speaking, you would be admitted with a 3.8 high school GPA or higher, and the awards range from $2,500 up to $4,000 per year, and they can be renewed for up to 4 years. Generally speaking, the renewal requirements stipulate that a student must maintain a minimum 3.0 GPA cumulatively to keep that award for the full 4 years. Students are considered automatically based on their admissions application, so no separate application for these awards. Big thing is you have to meet the admissions requirements, the scholarship minimums, and be admitted to CSU in a main campus full-time degree-seeking program to receive those funds. For a student who is not a Colorado resident, the amounts are different, and they're higher because the tuition is so much higher for a non-resident. At Colorado State University, a non-resident student could be considered for an admissions-based scholarship with a 3.2 GPA on up, and awards range from $2,500 per year up to $12,500 per year. Similarly renewable, like the resident awards that we just discussed. So, and the same requirements. So enrolled, admitted, and enrolled degree seeking full time. And WUI. Lots of folks have questions about WUI. WUI is a little bit unique at Colorado State University. So a lot of institutions in Western states participate in the WUI program, and we do as well. At Colorado State, WUI actually is a scholarship. It's an admissions-based scholarship, and it behaves a little bit differently than some of the aforementioned scholarships that I mentioned. Those aforementioned scholarships, you're charged tuition, either resident or non-resident, and then a payment of a scholarship comes in and helps reduce that tuition. WUI is actually a discount on tuition out the gate. So if you think back to that slide where I was showing the different cost of attendances, that's kind of how this shows up. A student who is a WUI scholar at CSU is not going to be charged the full non-resident tuition. They're going to be charged a reduced rate of tuition. The minimum requirements are that you be from a WUI state, demonstrate a GPA of a 3.2 or above on a 4.0 scale, and then these awards, or the WUI scholarship, is not stackable with the Green and Gold Award, so you can really qualify for one or the other, but not both. It is important to note that new for this upcoming academic year, 25-26, a student who is a WUI scholar with a 4.0 or above can actually qualify for an additional $2,500 per year, renewable for up to 4 years. So coupled with the value of the WUI kind of discount on tuition, this can be a really significant scholarship for some non-resident students and families. Just for context, this year, the value of the WUI discount from non-resident tuition down to that 150% of Colorado in-state tuition is roughly $10,300 ish. So it's a really significant discount and savings on tuition for qualified students. And then for this upcoming year, if a student has that 4.0 or higher, that $2,500 stacks on top of that $10,300-ish amount. So it's really a great deal for a student who qualifies, and you'll be notified if you qualify for the WUI award automatically. There is no separate application that is part of the admissions process when you are reviewed.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a moment to take a sip of water. You've been chatting for a while. Give you a little bit of a breather. I'm seeing all the questions come in, and I'm trying to hold back, not jumping in and answering some of those. So, as I said at the beginning, we want to try and answer as many of these questions as possible. But there were a lot of questions that popped up while Joe was talking about those admissions-specific merit scholarships. And so I just wanted to give a little bit more context, a lot of questions about weighted or unweighted GPA. So I wanted to answer to all of you that we will look at your weighted GPA. So we calculate if a student's not on a 4-point scale, we will calculate to a 4-point scale, but we'll take the highest GPA on a 4-point scale. So that's one thing to make sure people know it's a weighted GPA. And then the other is the notification. So typically what happens in terms of the timeline with the scholarships is students receive their admissions decision. We'll send an email notification, and then they'll receive an admit packet in the mail, usually about a week or so later. And then we follow that up with an email notification about any merit scholarship that a student might be receiving for both our green and gold and then also WUI. Our Colorado students have not received that notification yet. That's coming, I think, this week, maybe next week. So our non-resident students, you'll be starting to receive those sort of ongoing, and Colorado, that will be coming quickly. Okay, trying to see while I have the microphone for a moment if there were any other questions. We'll put some links in. Someone was asking about sort of the breakdown of those scholarships. We can put a link in for those. Okay, and then Joe, one thing as you sort of wrap up talking about loans and so forth, there were some questions about just timeline after families have submitted the FAFSA. So I don't know if you want to answer that now, or if you want to wait until you kind of proceed through. I know you've got timeline coming up, but that was one that came up.
Yes, timeline. We will get to that in my closing piece of this presentation, because I'm going to leave you all with some action items, and
Perfect.
definitely want you to make sure that you have that.
Right. Oh, Joe, sorry. One more thing. This question just came up, and I did want to answer this. It is based on all classes. So we don't calculate to just core courses. We're looking at all of the classes on the student's high school transcript. And that's typically with the transcript that we've received at the point of making that decision. So we will often see students as they're wrapping up the first semester of their senior year send us an updated transcript. And if you bump up into that next tier, we will award you that higher scholarship. Okay, Joe, now I will stop talking. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and it's back to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Heather, for chiming in. So, pivoting from the admissions-based scholarships that we've discussed, I am going to talk about federal direct loans as a possible tool for financing the cost of education. So federal direct loans are available to students if they complete the FAFSA. And oftentimes federal direct loans sound scary. And I'm here to really encourage folks to kind of step back from that fear of borrowing and do some research on federal direct loans. So many of the different types of financing that we hear about in the media are not necessarily student loans in the sense of what I'm talking about right now. They're alternative student loans through banks that don't have some of the same safety mechanisms that these programs do, that are really designed to help students and benefit students and keep them safe as they're progressing through their academic journey. The FAFSA is the ticket for consideration for these loans. There is no credit approval that's required for a federal direct student loan. The U.S. government is the guarantor for these funds, and they're also the lender. So what I'm showing you here are two different types of loans. There's a subsidized federal direct loan and an unsubsidized federal direct loan. The subsidized funds are really awarded based on financial need. So your FAFSA is telling us kind of what type of, to what degree of financial need you as a family demonstrate, and that's going to inform how you qualify for different federal need-based programs, including the subsidized student loan. There are limits on how much a student can borrow each academic year. So you can see here in this chart that a student who is a freshman can only borrow up to $5,500 cumulatively in federal direct loans in an academic year, and no more of $3,500 of that can be subsidized. The additional $2,000 in this freshman example would come in the form of an unsubsidized student loan. And generally speaking, most students who would complete the FAFSA and qualify for federal student aid are going to qualify minimally for an unsubsidized student loan. The difference between those two loans, the first one is the subsidized loan based on financial need, and the government is actually paying or subsidizing the interest as long as your student is enrolled at least half time. The unsubsidized loan starts accruing interest as soon as it's dispersed, although students do have the option of paying off that interest as they progress through their academic career, and that minimizes some of the post-graduation repayment amounts that a student might have to plan for. Federal Direct Parent Plus loans. So a PLUS loan is PLUS, that acronym, basically stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. And these are loans that you as a parent can borrow on behalf of your student to cover any remaining gap in the cost of education. So if you think about that amount that I showed earlier on in the presentation, you subtract out scholarships from the university that your student might be receiving, scholarships from their college, their department that they might be receiving, outside scholarships that you might anticipate bringing to the university, there might be some remaining amount left to pay. The subsidized and unsubsidized loans are one option to help reduce that balance. And then there's also this option that doesn't, this behaves differently in that a student is not the borrower in this loan program. The parent is doing it on behalf of the student. There is a credit approval involved with this particular loan program, but the benefit here is that it's an easy loan to secure. There are some protections and benefits that exist with a federal loan that perhaps a private loan through a bank or other type of agency would not be able to provide. And it's a useful financing tool if there happens to be any remaining balance that you're strategizing how to cover. Student employment is another great tool for thinking about the cost of education. And student employment is really kind of broken into two different categories. We have work study, which is a form of financial aid. Students complete the FAFSA and you're considered for a federal or a state work study award. And this is a financial aid award that, instead of it like dispersing or applying towards the tuition bill, is actually earned by a student in the form of a paycheck from their paying department. The other type of student employment is student hourly. At Colorado State University, we have a significant number of students who work in campus departments, and they're on the payroll just like Heather and I are as employees of the university. In terms of how those programs can be different, I've listed some of the pros and cons and nuances here on this slide. A work study position is generally a sweet gig. If you qualify for work study and you can secure a work study job on campus, it's ideal because departments are required to work around a student's class schedule. A student doesn't have to worry about commuting off campus to go to work and worry about parking and all of that. And it's really a great way for a student to get perspective into how the university works and really develop some lifelong skills that will enable them after they graduate from college. Student hourly positions can be similarly beneficial. However, there may be less ability to kind of restrict the place of those jobs. They might be on campus, they might be on the periphery of campus at other departments that don't have a physical presence like right on the main core of our university facilities. And there's sometimes different expectations. So an student hourly position is oftentimes a lot like just finding a job in the community at a grocery store, a bank, or some agency like that. But they're really a good way of finding additional resources that can help cover some of those expenses that a student might incur. Student employment is a great way to cover some of those indirect costs. So way back at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about those direct costs that show up on the bill, and then those other indirect costs that can be variable based on your circumstances. The direct costs are more often than not going to be paid by way of scholarships, student loans, grants, those types of financial aid. The student employment options here really represent an opportunity to cover some of those expenses that aren't going to show up on the bill. So, personal and miscellaneous expenses, living expenses, off campus types of things that students would just have as a normal part of being a student at a college or university.
Hey, Joe,
Yeah,
can I jump in and ask you a fun
of
question?
course.
Did you have a job in college? And what was it?
I did have a job in college. So if there's anybody from Kansas here, you're probably familiar with the Dillon's grocery chain. So in my small hometown, I actually worked in the seafood department at my local grocery store. So I actually went to school each morning smelling like fish. I would get up early, about 6 o'clock, go in and set up the seafood display in the meat department, and then I would go to class and smell like fish and wonder why all of my classmates were moving their chairs away from me. But that was my kind of student hourly but off campus source of
Hmm.
income when I was a student. Thank you, Heather, for asking.
That's awesome. I know. Well, I didn't know that about you, Joe. And seafood section in a landlocked state like Kansas, I'm
Exactly,
fascinated by that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I had a job. I worked in the snack shop at the college that I was at. I had a work study job in the snack shop, and then I worked at the Sunglass Hut at the local mall, and that was my off-campus job. So
That was a much more sophisticated and glamorous job than what.
I didn't smell after that one. All right, sorry to interrupt. I thought we just add that in. All right, go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about some of the high level pieces of the financial aid programs, kind of how to anticipate costs, how to apply for financial aid broadly, and then the different types, the different umbrellas of aid programs that exist once you apply. But there are also some alternative strategies for covering the cost of education, either the cost of education entirely or any remainder that might exist after grants, scholarships, and other sorts of financial aid apply and reduce that bill. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. So, personal savings are oftentimes part of the equation when students and families are paying for college. And one vehicle that we see a lot of at Colorado State are families that have 529 or college savings plans that they've set up for their student. We work with all college savings 529 providers at Colorado State University. Sometimes the providers process will differ a little bit, but we have experience and expertise in working with all of them. They kind of run the gamut. So our cashier's office on campus has specific instructions about how to engage your 529 plan if you have one and choose to pay the bill that way. We always encourage our students, especially if they have capacity over the summer, to work and save as much as possible. That seafood counter job that I had at my hometown grocery store was exactly that. Personal payments, we take all sorts of all different methods: cash, check, wire transfer. And then we also have the option of alternative student loans. So those are some of the loans that exist outside of the federal application process. Different banks in the space might provide an alternate loan that requires a credit-worthy borrower or a credit-worthy cosigner to be considered. But we work with hundreds of different alternative loan providers that provide kind of financing options that are outside of the federal space. CSU is not legally able to recommend a particular lender, but a quick internet search will yield some of the most well-known names in the alternative loan realm, and we work with all of them. CSU also offers a payment plan. And this is something that we've had for probably the past 3 to 4 years. It's still relatively new, but we're seeing that a significant number of our students and families are using the payment plan to cover any remaining gap in the cost of education. And sometimes they're using that in place of that Parent Plus loan or an alternative loan to cover any remaining balance if there is one. And that's great because the payment plan for kind of a one time installment fee that you set up allows you to pay off an account balance over time with no interest. And the benefit of the payment plan is that you can kind of set it and forget it, or you can also adjust it. So sometimes, what I mean by that is that sometimes a student will have their financial aid apply at the start of the semester, and they might have $4,000 or $5,000 left on their bill that they're uncertain. I don't necessarily want to take a student loan to cover that, but I can pay this off over time. So folks will register for the payment plan at that time. And then what happens a lot of the time is that a student will bring another scholarship in late in the semester, so September, October. You can actually go in and either cancel your payment plan after that or rebalance it to accommodate for that additional scholarship money that's come into the mix. You have the ability to set up the payment plan for the full academic year. You can do it one semester at a time, and there is no interest. So the cost is the enrollment fee. And then depending on when you enter into the plan, that's going to inform the amount of the down payment that the plan would require. The plan is administered by Nelnet, which is a third-party servicer that we work with to do our payment plan. And there is more information on the financial aid office website. If you click the link at the top left-hand corner that says Pay My Bill, you'll see information about the Nelnet product there. Next step. So this is, I think, what folks are really interested in knowing, especially around timing and when things will start to percolate with the financial aid process. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because if you haven't done so already, or if your student hasn't done so already, please consider completing the Colorado State University scholarship application. So the CSUSA, as we call it here on campus, is the ticket to being considered for scholarships administered by our 8 academic colleges, the Division of Student Affairs, and the Division of Enrollment and Access. So these are not admissions-based scholarships like we discussed earlier. These are scholarships that are oftentimes tied to a student's extracurricular activities, their areas of interest on campus, their declared major, program of study. There's a gamut of opportunities that are all considered by way of the CSUSA. It's accessible via RamWeb right now for admitted students, and that application closes on March 1st. So there's still time to complete the application. Scholarship review committees on campus begin doing all of their work right after March 1st. And generally speaking, most students know if they're going to receive a scholarship from the CSUSA prior to May 1. So we really do make an effort to get those scholarship decisions out as a campus community as quickly as possible so that you have that additional information to factor into the overall financial aid offer. December, where we're at right now, believe it or not, is FAFSA time. So if you've tracked any of the national news about the FAFSA over the past 18 to 24 months, you know that that process has been beleaguered by some delays federally and some challenges in rolling out a new FAFSA form for the 24-25 academic year. Typically, the FAFSA is available October 1st. Last year, it was very, very delayed. It wasn't until after New Year's that the application was made available, and it was rife with problems and caused a lot of delays for the class that's here with us right now. This year, however, the U.S. Department of Education has provided some reinforcements to ensure a more steady rollout of that application. And I'm pleased to share that that application is actually live and accessible right now. So if you haven't already completed the 25-26 free application for federal student aid, please do so as quickly as possible. It's open, it's ready to go, and really, it's an easier process than it has been in the past. So encourage you to start that if you haven't done so already. If you have questions about the FAFSA or are concerned about how your unique circumstances might factor in, reach out to us and we're glad to have an individual conversation about that. If you are a Colorado resident, go ahead and apply for the College Opportunity Fund. As I shared earlier, that can be accessed from the Financial Aid Office website as well. So wintertime, that's kind of ambiguous, but I'll tell you what to expect. We are anticipating that we will begin sending first year freshmen financial aid offers by mid to late January this spring. So excited about that. We are actively receiving FAFSA data from students and families who are submitting to us. So again, do that as quickly as possible. And we are in the process of getting our systems and processes ready to send those financial aid offers out next month. It's hard to believe that January is here. But what we will send to you is a printed financial aid offer letter. So a couple of bits of communication will happen when that starts. Students will receive an email letting them know that they have a financial aid offer that they can view out on RamWeb. And then we supplement that with a really nice color 2-page mail piece that will go into more detail about that financial aid offer. So you'll be able to see that cost of attendance that I mentioned earlier in greater detail. You'll be able to see what parts of that cost of attendance will show up on the student bill, what's not going to show up on the student bill, but we want you to think about and plan for, and then the different types of aid, along with the next steps, if there are any next steps, needed to secure that aid and be ready for disbursement in August. March 1st, as I mentioned, is the CSUSA deadline, so please, students can consider doing that application as quickly as possible. That's a great holiday break activity. Parents, flag that for your students if they're not on this call tonight. Great opportunity to be considered for additional scholarship dollars that are awarded by our larger campus community. In the springtime, so kind of the months between the end of January up through May 1st, you'll be getting financial aid offers potentially from a variety of institutions that you've applied to attend. And we really want you to kind of look at those, lay them out side by side, and reach out to us if you have questions about the cost of attendance, concerns about the information that's being shared, and we're happy to step through that financial aid offer with you based on your unique circumstances and make sure that you have all of the information that you need to make an informed decision. And then that leads us right up to Heather's holiday, which is May 1st, when we celebrate generally students committing to the university on that date, and we look forward to who we get to welcome to the university in the fall. So that's a really, really high level summary of key dates related to the financial aid process. I would stress that we encourage students to complete the financial aid process as quickly as possible, but there isn't a hard and fast deadline. So if you really have concerns about the process or questions, reach out and we're happy to help step through those with you. And now, Heather, I'll let you moderate any questions that might have come in the last 45 minutes.
For sure. Yes. Lots of questions that have come in. And a big shout out to Kelsey, our colleague behind the scenes, who's been popping some different links in and answering some questions. So thanks for that. I also want to give some quick shout outs. We had some folks that are familiar with Dillon's in Kansas, Joe, and people were asking where in Kansas. So do you want to share where in Kansas you're from?
I am from Hays, Kansas. If you've heard of it, I am a Fort Hays State University alum. Go Tigers. And made my way to Colorado and to Fort Collins in 2012. So love being here, and but yes, a Kansas boy at heart.
Love it. Yes. And we also had a parent who's an alum of CSU, and their off-campus job was working at Coopersmith's, which is a favorite restaurant here in Fort Collins, in Old Town Fort Collins. So a couple things I wanted to mention, and I'll try to answer some questions to give Joe a little bit of a break, but then Joe, I might slide some questions your way as well. For those that have joined a little bit later, this is being recorded and we will have it uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access it at a later date. There were a couple questions about the CSUSA being only for Colorado. That is not true. Any student can submit the CSUSA, and we encourage all students to do that. I also wanted to talk just a little bit about sort of the timeline as we head in. Joe sort of outlined what's happening on the financial aid side of things, but I wanted to just sort of talk through timeline. There's a couple questions about should we submit our deposit? What are the advantages and so forth? So at this point, as I mentioned, we are reviewing applications for admission, making admissions decisions. When you and your student are ready to say, yes, we're coming to CSU, they can submit their enrollment deposit. And we do that up until that May 1st date. That's the National national candidate reply date when we like to hear from students that they're coming to CSU. In between that, there's a lot of things that are happening. A lot of it's related to financial aid and the timing of all of that. So, the next sort of milestone date, besides what Joe has shared on the financial aid side of things, is actually registering for our summer orientation program and then also signing up for housing. Both of those applications will open on January 29th. And you can't access those unless you've submitted your acceptance to come to CSU. So someone had asked, is there an advantage to saying that you're coming to CSU before May 1st? There is, in terms of just accessing those two next steps, signing up for orientation and signing up for housing. We'll do another webinar in the springtime related specifically to housing and orientation. So more information to come. But that was one thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. There was also a question about stacking scholarships. And so I wanted to just mention, in terms of our merit scholarships, the admissions-based scholarships, those are not stackable except for that one instance that Joe shared with the WUI. For students that have that 4.0 or higher, they can get that Rocky Mountain Scholar Award. But other than that, our merit scholarships are not stackable. However, if a student were to receive any of the scholarships through the CSUSA, those are in addition to their merit scholarship. And also, if a student is admitted and decides to come and join the honors program, that is added on top of scholarships as well. Joe, I'm a little outside of my lane talking about that. Did I cover it? Anything you'd add about stacking scholarships or financial aid?
Perfectly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, good. Awesome. Thank you. I'm just going to say, I just saw this question. The date in January for the housing and orientation to open is January 29th. So that's the date for that. Okay. Joe, here's a question for you. And I know there's some questions out there about residency, and that I know that gets very specific, but I'm curious if you could just generally talk about sort of tuition classification, residency, and how that works in the state of Colorado.
Sure. Residency in Colorado is complicated. I would encourage anybody who has a question about Colorado residency law for tuition purposes to visit the financial aid office website. So we have a section dedicated to residency, all of the exceptions, and what's involved with establishing residency in the state of Colorado. And it's important to note that our state is very different than a lot of states. So some states might have much more loose residency statutes. Colorado does tend to be one of the most stringent in the country as far as what it takes to qualify as a Colorado resident for tuition purposes. That website, though, goes into detail about kind of everything that's involved. High level, though, a student's residency is determined at the point of admission. If a student feels like they should be a Colorado resident, they have to document that they have established legal ties to Colorado. So for a dependent student, generally an incoming freshman undergraduate student at CSU, that looks like your parents actually moving to Colorado, establishing residency in a home that you've purchased, an apartment that you've leased, registering a motor vehicle in the state, registering to vote in the state of Colorado, filing a state of Colorado income tax return. And those are not exclusive items. You can't just do one. You have to do like all of them and hold those ties for 12 months preceding the date on which you actually establish you're actually a Colorado resident. So there's a lot that's involved, but the website goes into more detail. And if you feel like some of that might be reflective of your circumstances, there is a online self-guided residency orientation that you can take that will walk you through all of that in greater detail and help you suss out if it might be possible to submit a residency petition. If it is possible, that's when we would ask for supporting documentation for all of those things that I just listed off, and a committee would review to make sure that the petition is in alignment with state statute. And then at that time, residency is turned over for tuition purposes. I will share one important thing, and I think I saw this question come up in the chat. If a student is admitted as a non-resident and qualified for a non-resident scholarship at the time of admission and then subsequently becomes a Colorado resident, you would unfortunately lose and forfeit that scholarship. So the tuition amounts would change and that scholarship would change along with them. So important to note, but encourage you to review that website. And also, similar to the financial aid process, residency gets to be very, very specific to a student and family's unique circumstances. So if you have any questions about that, the financial aid office here at Colorado State is the office that oversees tuition classification. Come visit with us and we're happy to help step you through that.
Perfect. Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much. Okay, as you were chatting, I made a couple notes of some other topics that I just wanted to cover. I gave that little bit of a teaser about honors without giving a lot of context to it. So I just wanted to share a little bit about honors. There were some questions about applying for the honors program, and that is a separate application process. You do not have to have decided that you're coming to CSU in order to apply to the honors program. So that application is open right now. There are students who are automatically invited to apply to the honors program, typically at a certain GPA or higher, but students can still apply to the honors program. So we'll put a link into the chat with some additional information. The honors application is due on February 1st, so I have a little less than 2 months to submit that honors application. I said something about housing, and so I've seen a couple questions come in about housing, and housing is required for all incoming first-year students. There is an exemption process for students, and it's typically based on where the student lives. So if they live within a certain radius, zip code area of campus, they can apply for an exemption. Joe, there's another Fort Hays alum that just popped in there. But for the housing, we do guarantee housing for incoming first year students. And then there is housing available for continuing students as well. And then there were some questions about just parents continuing to receive communications. And we try our best to include parents in as many of our communications to students as they're going through the admissions process. So you should be copied on a lot of those updates, and especially as it relates to deadlines as well. All right. Joe, there were a couple questions that really get kind of into the specifics of certain students and families' financial. So I definitely don't want to cover those, but wondering if you maybe can give a plug for the net price calculator and just how people can sort of think about what the cost of attendance might look like as they're going through the process of applying for FAFSA and waiting to get their financial aid package.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So Colorado State University, like most institutions of higher education, has what's called a net price calculator. It's a federally mandated consumer information tool that we have on our website. You can access it through the financial aid office website, and I think it's under that same section of paying your bill. So Kelsey can put the link to the net price calculator in the chat if I'm misspeaking, and you'll have it there for certain. But that allows you to go in and start kind of modeling what your information might look like and what it might result in terms of a financial aid offer. It's particularly useful earlier on in the process when the FAFSA isn't available and you're trying to kind of think about what you might qualify for. The FAFSA is available now, so it's going to be the best source of information about projecting kind of the financial aid offer that includes federal and state financial aid. Our net price calculator goes a little bit farther. So if you put in information around your residency, high school GPA, it's going to estimate or project what types of scholarships, admissions-based scholarships, you could qualify to receive. It is an estimate, so it is in no way an official offer of financial aid, but a useful tool to kind of see what those costs are, what types of aid might be available, and then think about what that bottom line could look like. And encourage everybody to take a look at that and run the numbers if you're interested.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Joe. All right. So we have a lot of questions that are coming. I just got distracted by someone asking me where in Illinois I'm from. So I'll just mention that I'm from Geneva, Illinois, which is a far west suburb of Chicago. Joe and I love talking about our Midwest roots. So thanks for that question. All right, well, we're nearing the end of this webinar, and I know there were so many questions that came in. We had over 500 of you joining us this evening, and so we tried very much to get as many of those questions answered. And please reach out to us in the Office of Admissions and then also in the Office of Financial Aid, especially as it relates to specific questions with your student and with your particular situation. We're happy to answer those questions as much as possible. So before we completely close things out, I wanted to just offer an opportunity for Joe to provide any sort of last minute pieces of advice. You've covered so much great information tonight with your presentation, which again, this is being recorded. It'll be up on our YouTube channel. So those of you, you can access it later. But Joe, any parting words or pieces of advice you'd like to give to the future Rams that are listening to us tonight?
Future Rams, apply for financial aid. So we always recommend that. Even if you think that you might not qualify, have that application here because it helps us have an extra tool in the tool belt to assist in covering your expenses and your cost of education at Colorado State University. And then what I would stress to students who are here, as well as parents, so you can ping your students, once you apply for financial aid, be on the lookout. Look at your email, pay attention to RamWeb, because anytime that we need an additional bit of documentation to ensure that you're receiving your maximum consideration for financial aid, we're going to send an email and message you about that on RamWeb, which is our student portal. So too often we have students that fill out the financial aid application and think, oh, I'm done, I'm good. That's not always the case. So stay engaged in the process, and we're here with you every step of the way to answer your questions and make sure that you have all of the information that you need. So apply and then pay attention to your emails and RamWeb.
Perfect. All right, Joe, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Keep an eye out, like Joe said, for any notifications that we are sending your way, and we'll have this up on our website very soon. Thanks so much. Appreciate you all being here. Go
Go
Rams.
Rams!